Sarah Martinez wiped down the sticky table for the third time, her worn apron already stained with coffee and food remnants from the morning rush. The Golden Crown Diner buzzed with its usual mix of truckers, office workers, and tourists who had wandered off the main highway. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency, balancing plates on her arm while dodging the wandering hands of customers who thought her smile was an invitation. "Hey, coffee girl!" shouted Jerry from table 6, waving his empty cup in the air like a trophy. "This ain't rocket science. Fill it up." Sarah forced a smile and hurried over with the coffee pot. Jerry was a regular, the kind who left pocket change as a tip and made crude jokes about her appearance. As she poured, he leaned back in his chair, looking her up and down with obvious disdain. "You know, honey, maybe if you put some effort into your looks, you might land yourself a real job instead of slinging hash in this dump," Jerry said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. His friends chuckled, enjoying the show. Sarah's cheeks burned, but she kept pouring. She had heard worse. Much worse. The comments about her faded uniform, her tired appearance, her lack of education. They came daily from customers who saw her as nothing more than hired help. What they didn't know was that beneath her exhausted exterior lay a story of survival, sacrifice, and hidden strength. "Maybe she's saving up for night school," one of Jerry's companions added with a smirk. "Though I doubt she's got the brains for anything better than this." The words stung because they echoed her own fears. Sarah had dropped out of college when her mother fell ill, spending her savings on medical bills and working multiple jobs to keep their small apartment. Now, 3 years later, her mother was gone, and Sarah remained trapped in a cycle of barely making ends meet. She finished pouring and moved away, but Jerry wasn't done. "Wait a minute," he called out, grabbing her wrist as she passed. "What's that ugly thing on your finger? Looks like something from a cereal box." Sarah glanced down at the ring on her right hand, a simple band with an intricate trident design. It was the only thing of value she owned, though its worth wasn't measured in dollars. Her grandfather had given it to her before he died, telling her it was a family heirloom that would protect her when she needed it most. She had never understood what he meant, but she wore it always, finding comfort in its familiar weight. "It's nothing," she mumbled, trying to pull her hand free. But Jerry held tight, examining the ring with mock interest. "Seriously, where'd you get this? The dollar store? It's almost as cheap-looking as your uniform." The diner had grown quieter, other customers turning to watch the spectacle. Sarah felt tears threatening, but refused to let them fall. She had learned early that showing weakness only made bullies worse. "Please let go," she said quietly. "Or what? You'll cry to your manager." Jerry laughed. "Face it, sweetheart. You're exactly where you belong, serving people who are actually worth something." That's when the bell above the entrance chimed, and a man walked in who changed everything. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made conversation stop and heads turn. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his expensive suit fit like it was tailored specifically for his frame. But it was his eyes that caught attention, steel gray and sharp, missing nothing as they swept across the room. The stranger took in the scene immediately. Jerry still gripping Sarah's wrist, her face flushed with embarrassment, the circle of onlookers enjoying the free entertainment. His expression remained neutral, but something dangerous flickered in those gray eyes. He walked directly to their table, his movements controlled and purposeful. Jerry, sensing the shift in atmosphere, finally released Sarah's wrist and turned to face the newcomer. "Can I help you?" Jerry asked, his earlier bravado already fading. The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze dropped to Sarah's hand, lingering on the trident ring. For a moment, his composed mask slipped, revealing something that looked almost like recognition. When he looked back up, his entire demeanor had changed. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying an authority that made the entire diner fall silent, "I think I can help you." Sarah rubbed her wrist where Jerry had grabbed her, confused by the sudden tension crackling through the air. The stranger's eyes met hers, and she saw something there she couldn't quite identify. Respect, perhaps, or maybe something deeper. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever, or that the ring her grandfather had given her was about to reveal secrets that would transform her from an invisible waitress into someone who commanded the attention of the most powerful people in the city. The stranger extended his hand towards Sarah, completely ignoring Jerry and his friends. "Commander Marcus Steele," he said simply. "And you are?" Sarah stared at his outstretched hand, uncertain. The title Commander hung in the air like a challenge, making Jerry shift uncomfortably in his seat. She had never heard of Marcus Steele, but something about his bearing suggested he was someone important. "Sarah," she replied softly, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and she noticed how his eyes kept returning to her ring. "Sarah," he repeated, as if testing how her name sounded. "Tell me about that ring." The question caught her off guard. In all her years of wearing it, only bullies like Jerry had ever commented on the simple band. "It was my grandfather's," she said hesitantly. "He gave it to me before he died." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Do you know what the symbol means?" Sarah glanced down at the Trident design she had always assumed was decorative. "Not really. He said it was a family heirloom, but we never talked about its history." "Hey, buddy," Jerry interrupted, his voice loud and aggressive as he tried to regain control of the situation. "We were having a private conversation here. Why don't you find your own table?" Marcus turned to face Jerry with the kind of calm that preceded storms. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried an edge that made several customers reach for their phones, suddenly nervous about what they might witness. "I apologize for interrupting," Marcus said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "I couldn't help but notice you were harassing this young woman." "Harassing?" Jerry scoffed, but his bravado was clearly forced now. "I was just talking to the help. Nothing wrong with that." "The help?" Marcus repeated, his eyes never leaving Jerry's face. "Is that how you see her?" Sarah found herself holding her breath. She had never had anyone stand up for her like this, especially not someone who radiated the kind of authority that made Jerry's friends suddenly find their coffee fascinating. "Look, pal," Jerry said, standing up to match Marcus's height, but falling several inches short. "I don't know who you think you are, but this ain't your business." Marcus smiled then, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "You're absolutely right. Let me introduce myself properly." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal an identification card that made Jerry's face go pale. "Commander Marcus Steele, Strategic Operations Division," Marcus said clearly, ensuring everyone nearby could hear. "And I make it my business to ensure civilians are treated with respect." Sarah couldn't see the ID card from her angle, but whatever it showed had an immediate effect on Jerry and his friends. They exchanged nervous glances, their earlier confidence evaporating like steam. "We were just leaving," one of Jerry's companions mumbled, already reaching for his wallet to pay their bill. "Excellent decision," Marcus replied. He waited while they fumbled with money and gathered their belongings, his presence making them clumsy with nerves. Jerry avoided eye contact as he passed, no longer the loud bully who had enjoyed humiliating Sarah moments before. Once they were gone, the diner slowly returned to its normal volume level, though Sarah noticed several customers stealing glances at their table. Marcus tucked his ID away and gestured to the empty booth. "May I sit?" he asked politely. Sarah nodded, sliding into the opposite side. Up close, she could see the small details that marked him as someone from a different world than hers. The expensive watch, the perfectly manicured hands, the way he carried himself like someone accustomed to being obeyed. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did," Marcus replied firmly. "But that's not why I'm here." He leaned forward slightly, his gray eyes intense. "Sarah, that ring you're wearing, it's not just a family heirloom. It's a symbol of the Trident Society." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it suggested it should. "I've never heard of any Trident Society. Very few people have. It's an organization that has existed in shadow for over 2 centuries, protecting certain interests and maintaining balance in situations where conventional authority isn't enough." Marcus paused, studying her face. Your grandfather never mentioned serving in any special capacity? Military, intelligence, government work that might have been classified. Sarah tried to remember. Her grandfather had been a quiet man who worked as a mechanic and told her stories about faraway places. But now that she thought about it, there had always been gaps in his history, periods he never discussed. He traveled a lot when I was little, she said slowly. Mom said it was work, but he never talked about what kind of work. And sometimes people would come to the house, serious people in suits who spoke quietly with him in the garage. Marcus nodded, as if this confirmed something he already suspected. The ring you're wearing isn't just symbolic. It's a key, Sarah. A key to resources, to protection, to a network of people who have sworn to help those who carry the Trident. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. It's just an old ring. I'm just a waitress. You're the granddaughter of Thomas Martinez, Marcus said. And hearing her grandfather's full name spoken with such reverence made Sarah's breath catch. Tommy was one of the finest operatives the society ever had. He saved my father's life in Somalia and probably prevented 3 international incidents that never made the news. The words seemed to echo in Sarah's mind. Her gentle grandfather, who had taught her change oil and make pancakes, had been some kind of secret agent. It seemed impossible, yet it explained so much about the mysterious visitors and his reluctance to discuss his past. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Marcus reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a business card. "Because, Sarah Martinez, your waitressing days are over. If you're willing to honor your grandfather's legacy, I'd like to offer you a position that will change your life forever." Sarah stared at the elegant business card in her hands. The thick, cream-colored paper felt expensive between her fingers, and the embossed Trident symbol matched exactly the design on her ring. Below it, in simple black letters, was printed Commander Marcus Steele, Strategic Liaison, and a phone number. "I don't understand," she said, looking up from the card. "What kind of position?" Marcus glanced around the diner, ensuring their conversation remained private. "The kind that requires intelligence, integrity, and the ability to see beyond surface appearances, qualities you've clearly demonstrated despite the circumstances that brought you here." Sarah almost laughed. "You think I'm intelligent? I dropped out of college. I serve coffee and clean tables for a living. Half the customers here treat me like I'm invisible. And yet you survived 3 years of that treatment without becoming bitter or cruel," Marcus observed. "You've maintained your dignity in the face of constant disrespect. That takes a special kind of strength, Sarah, the kind of strength the society values." Through the diner's large windows, Sarah could see Jerry and his friends climbing into their truck, still shaken by their encounter with Marcus. She had dreamed of moments like this, someone putting bullies in their place, recognizing that she was worth more than they assumed. But this felt surreal, like a fantasy she might have while washing dishes during the late shift. "What did my grandfather actually do?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "He was what we call a guardian, someone who operates in the spaces between official agencies, handling situations that require discretion and moral flexibility. Sometimes that meant protecting witnesses. Sometimes it meant recovering stolen assets or information. Always, it meant serving something larger than personal gain." "You're talking about him like he was a spy." "Not exactly. Spies work for governments. Guardians work for principles. Your grandfather believed in protecting innocent people from those who would exploit or harm them. He spent 30 years of his life making the world safer, one mission at a time." Sarah touched the ring unconsciously, trying to reconcile this image with her memories of the man who had taught her to fish and helped her with homework. "Why didn't he ever tell me?" "Because he wanted you to have a normal childhood. The society only reveals itself to those who choose to join, never to family members unless they seek us out." Marcus leaned back in the booth. "But when a guardian dies, their ring doesn't lose its power. It waits for the next generation to discover what it represents." The diner manager, Mr. Peterson, approached their table with obvious nervousness. He had witnessed the confrontation with Jerry and was clearly unsure how to handle the well-dressed stranger who had scared off paying customers. "Sarah, Peterson said carefully, "Is everything all right here? I can't have any more trouble in my establishment." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus stood and extended his hand to Peterson. "Commander Steele, I apologize for any disruption. I was actually hoping to discuss a business opportunity with Miss Martinez." Peterson's expression shifted as he shook Marcus's hand. The title Commander and Marcus's professional bearing clearly impressed him. "A business opportunity? Miss Martinez has been recommended for a position with my organization. A significant upgrade from her current situation, I believe." Marcus's tone was polite, but carried an underlying authority that made Peterson straighten his posture. "Oh," Peterson said, glancing between them uncertainly. "Well, Sarah's been a reliable employee, but if she has other opportunities—" "She does," Marcus confirmed. "In fact, I'd like to discuss the details with her privately, if you don't mind." Peterson nodded quickly and hurried away, leaving them alone again. Sarah watched the interaction with amazement. In 30 seconds, Marcus had transformed her from a troublesome waitress into someone worthy of respect in Peterson's eyes. "How did you do that?" she asked. "People respond to confidence and authority when they're presented properly," Marcus explained. "It's one of the first lessons you learn in this work. Most conflicts can be resolved without violence if you understand how to project the right kind of power." Sarah looked around the diner with fresh eyes. The customers who had watched Jerry humiliate her were now stealing respectful glances at her table. The ring on her finger, which had been mocked as cheap costume jewelry an hour ago, suddenly felt heavier with significance. "What would this job actually involve?" she asked. Marcus pulled out a slim tablet and showed her a photograph of an elegant office building downtown. "The society maintains several legitimate business fronts. You would start as an administrative assistant at Steele & Associates, our consulting firm. The work appears ordinary from the outside, managing schedules, handling correspondence, coordinating meetings. Appears ordinary? Because our real clients aren't typical businesses. We provide security consulting for people who face unusual threats. Politicians receiving death threats. Whistleblowers who need protection. Families caught between warring criminal organizations. Your job would be to help coordinate their protection while maintaining the appearance of running a normal office." Sarah felt a thrill of possibility mixed with terror. "What if I'm not smart enough? What if I make mistakes that get people hurt?" "Your grandfather asked the same questions when he was recruited," Marcus said gently. "The society doesn't expect perfection, Sarah. We expect dedication and growth. You would receive training in everything from computer systems to situational awareness to basic self-defense. Most importantly, you would never work alone. Every guardian has a team, and every team has experienced members who remember what it was like to be new." A customer at another table waved impatiently for more coffee, but Sarah found herself ignoring him for the first time in years. For the first time since her mother's death, she was discussing a future that didn't involve scraping by from paycheck to paycheck. "What's the catch?" she asked. "This sounds too good to be true." Marcus smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "The catch is that once you join, you'll never be able to go back to seeing the world the way you do now. You'll know about threats most people never imagine. You'll carry responsibilities that can't be shared with friends or family. And sometimes you'll have to make decisions that keep you awake at night." He gestured around the diner. "But you'll never again have to endure what happened here today. You'll never again have to smile while someone treats you as less than human. And most importantly, you'll have the chance to ensure that other people don't have to endure it either." Sarah touched her grandfather's ring one more time, feeling the smooth metal warm against her skin. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she could almost hear his voice telling her that this was what he had been preparing her for all those years ago when he taught her to be strong, to be observant, to trust her instincts even when others dismissed her. "When would I start?" she asked. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in front of a gleaming downtown office building, wearing a professional suit that cost more than she used to make in 2 months. The transformation felt surreal. From the Golden Crown Diner to the 32nd floor of one of the city's most prestigious business towers. But the real change wasn't in her clothes or her surroundings. It was in how differently people looked at her now. The elevator ride to Steele and Associates felt like ascending to another world. Through the glass walls of the office, she could see the city spread out below, the same streets where she had struggled for years now seeming like a distant memory. The receptionist who greeted her, a woman named Elena with kind eyes and a knowing smile, wore a ring identical to Sarah's on her left hand. "Welcome to the family," Elena said warmly, leading her through a maze of modern offices where people in expensive suits conducted what appeared to be ordinary business meetings. But Sarah was beginning to understand that appearances meant very little in this world. Her training had begun the day after she left the diner. Marcus hadn't been exaggerating about the society's resources. Within hours, she had been provided with temporary housing in a secure apartment complex, a complete wardrobe appropriate for professional work, and enrollment in an intensive program that covered everything from computer security to body language analysis. The instructors had been patient but demanding. Sarah learned to spot surveillance, to detect lies in conversation, to navigate complex databases that tracked threats against their clients. Most importantly, she learned that intelligence came in many forms, and her years of reading people's moods and motivations as a waitress had given her skills that couldn't be taught in any classroom. "Your first assignment," Marcus had explained during her final week of training, "is to assist with a situation that requires exactly the kind of insight you've developed. We're protecting a family whose teenage daughter received a scholarship to an elite private school." The threats began the day she enrolled. Now, as Elena led her to her new office, Sarah felt the familiar mixture of nerves and determination that had carried her through the training program. Her workspace was elegant but functional, with multiple monitors displaying what appeared to be normal business applications, but which she now knew were sophisticated tracking and communication systems. "The Morrison family," Elena explained, placing a thick file on Sarah's desk. "Dr. Jennifer Morrison is a pediatric surgeon, and her husband David runs a small construction company. Their daughter Amanda is 16, brilliant, and the first person from her neighborhood to receive a full scholarship to Whitmore Academy." Sarah opened the file and studied the photographs. The Morrisons looked like any middle-class family, but the threat assessment reports told a different story. Someone had been sending increasingly aggressive messages to Amanda's school email, demanding she withdraw from Whitmore and return to her proper place. "Local police?" Sarah asked, treating it as a prank. "No explicit violence threatened, no clear criminal activity they can prosecute." Elena sat on the edge of the desk. "But the psychological profile suggests escalation is likely. Someone who sees Amanda's success as a personal threat to the natural order." Sarah studied the timeline of messages. They had started subtle, suggestions that Amanda didn't belong at such a prestigious school, that she was taking someone else's rightful place. But they had grown more personal, referencing details about her family's financial struggles and her father's work schedule that suggested the sender had been watching them. "What's our approach?" Sarah asked. "You're going to meet Amanda," Elena replied. "Not as a security consultant, but as someone who understands what it's like to be underestimated and targeted because of your background." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Sarah would volunteer as a mentor through Whitmore Academy's community outreach program, a legitimate position that would give her regular access to Amanda while appearing completely natural. Her job was to build trust, assess the threat level, and watch for signs that the harassment was affecting Amanda's safety or mental health. 2 days later, Sarah found herself sitting across from Amanda Morrison in the Academy's library. The girl was exactly as described, brilliant, determined, and carrying herself with the careful composure of someone who knew she was being watched and judged. Sarah recognized the expression immediately. It was the same one she had worn while serving coffee to people who thought she was invisible. "So you graduated from Whitmore?" Amanda asked, reviewing Sarah's carefully constructed background. "Several years ago," Sarah replied. "I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong here, like everyone is waiting for you to prove you deserve your place." Amanda's careful mask slipped slightly. "Some people have made it very clear that's exactly what they think." "The messages?" Amanda looked surprised that Sarah knew about them. "The school counselor mentioned them to the mentorship program." I guess they want to make sure I have support. Among other things, Sarah said carefully. What do you think about them? At first, I thought they were just some jealous kid from my old school. But Amanda hesitated, glancing around the library. Whoever is writing them knows things they shouldn't know. Personal things about my family. Sarah felt her training kick in. This wasn't just harassment, it was surveillance. Someone was investing significant time and energy in watching the Morrison family, learning their routines, their vulnerabilities. That suggested a level of obsession that made physical escalation much more likely. Have you noticed anyone following you? Anyone who seems to show up in multiple places where you are? Amanda shook her head, but Sarah could see uncertainty in her eyes. I don't know. Maybe. There's a man I've seen at the coffee shop near our house a few times when I walk home from school. But that could be coincidence. Sarah made a mental note to have Elena check surveillance footage from the coffee shop. Amanda, I want you to promise me something. If you feel unsafe, even if you're not sure why, you call me immediately. She handed over a business card with her direct number. Day or night doesn't matter. Trust your instincts. You really think someone might try to hurt me? Sarah looked across the table at this brave, intelligent girl who reminded her so much of herself at that age, determined to succeed despite the obstacles, refusing to be intimidated by people who wanted her to fail. But unlike Sarah's struggles, which had been about poverty and limited opportunities, Amanda was facing something darker. Someone who saw her success as a personal affront, who felt entitled to destroy what she had achieved. I think, Sarah said carefully, that some people can't stand watching others succeed when they've failed, and sometimes those people decide to do something about it. That night, Sarah reviewed the case files in her apartment, cross-referencing the timeline of threats with Marcus's database of known extremist groups and individuals who targeted minority students in elite schools. What she found made her blood run cold. The pattern was too sophisticated for a random stalker. Someone with professional surveillance skills was watching the Morrison family, and the psychological profile suggested they were building toward a confrontation that would either force Amanda to withdraw from school or escalate to physical violence. Sarah reached for her phone to call Marcus, knowing that their next move would determine whether Amanda Morrison became another success story or another cautionary tale about what happened to people who dared to reach beyond their assigned place in the world. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday night, when Sarah was monitoring the surveillance feeds from around the Morrison house. She had been tracking patterns for 2 weeks, mapping the mysterious figure who appeared too frequently in Amanda's vicinity to be coincidence. Tonight, he had made a mistake. The man Amanda had noticed at the coffee shop was named Derek Ashford, and his background check revealed exactly what Sarah had feared. Former security contractor, dismissed for excessive force complaints, with a documented history of targeting what he called diversity initiatives at private institutions. According to his social media posts, which Elena had managed to access through the society's resources, he viewed Amanda's scholarship as part of a conspiracy to deny opportunities to deserving candidates. He's escalating, Marcus said when Sarah called him with the identification. Ashford has been linked to 3 other incidents at private schools over the past 2 years. In each case, he started with anonymous threats, moved to surveillance, and then physical confrontation, Sarah finished. What happened in the other cases? 2 students withdrew from their schools after he cornered them with what he called reality checks, aggressive confrontations designed to intimidate them into leaving. The 3rd student refused to back down, and Marcus was quiet for a moment. She was hospitalized with a concussion and broken ribs. Ashford claimed self-defense, said she attacked him first. No weaknesses, no conviction. Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. Through her apartment window, she could see the lights of the city where Amanda Morrison was sleeping, unaware that a dangerous man was planning her future for her. What's our move? We protect her, but we also end this permanently. Ashford has been allowed to terrorize students for too long because no one was willing to take the kind of direct action that stops predators like him. The next morning, Sarah arrived at Whitmore Academy early, positioning herself where she could observe Amanda's arrival. The girl looked tired, the stress of constant vigilance wearing on her despite her determination to continue her education. Sarah's heart ached, remembering her own exhaustion during those final months at the diner when every shift felt like an endurance test. Sarah, Amanda waved as she approached the library. I'm so glad you're here early. I wanted to ask your advice about something. They settled into their usual study alcove, but Sarah could see that Amanda was struggling to concentrate. Dark circles under her eyes suggested sleepless nights, and she kept glancing toward the windows as if expecting to see someone watching. The messages stopped, Amanda said quietly. 3 days ago, they just stopped coming. I should feel relieved, but somehow it's worse. Like he's planning something instead of just threatening. Sarah's training had prepared her for this moment. Ashford's pattern was consistent. The threat stopped when he shifted from psychological intimidation to physical action. Amanda, I need you to listen carefully. My organization has reason to believe the person sending those messages plans to confront you directly. Probably today. Amanda's face went pale. Your organization? I thought you were just a mentor volunteer. I am. But I also work for people who specialize in protecting students like you for people like him. Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Amanda a photograph of Derek Ashford. Have you seen this man? Amanda's sharp intake of breath was answer enough. He was outside the coffee shop again yesterday, and I saw him near the bus stop this morning. He was just standing there, staring. Good. You noticed him, which means your instincts are working. Sarah stood up, her mind already shifting to the tactical planning that had become second nature during her training. I need you to stay in the library until I come back. If anyone other than me or school staff approaches you, you scream as loudly as you can. Where are you going? To have a conversation with Mr. Ashford that he won't forget. Sarah found him exactly where her surveillance indicated he would be, at the coffee shop across from Whitmore Academy, position where he could watch the building while maintaining plausible deniability. He was exactly as the photographs had shown, tall, muscular, with the kind of aggressive bearing that intimidated teenagers, but would collapse quickly when faced with someone who refused to be afraid. She approached his table directly, no pretense of coincidence or subtlety. Derek Ashford. He looked up from his newspaper, startled by the direct approach. Do I know you? You should. I represent Amanda Morrison's interests. Sarah sat down across from him without invitation, noting how his eyes immediately shifted to assess potential exits. We need to discuss your harassment of a minor. I don't know what you're talking about, Ashford said, but his defensive posture contradicted his words. Sarah placed her tablet on the table and showed him a compilation of evidence, photographs of him watching Amanda, copies of his threatening emails tracked through digital forensics, timestamp surveillance footage showing his presence near the Morrison house. 14 counts of criminal stalking, harassment of a minor, electronic intimidation. That's before we get to the pattern evidence from your previous victims. Ashford's face flushed with anger. You can't prove anything. And that girl doesn't belong at that school anyway. She's taking a spot that should go to someone who earned it. Someone like who? Sarah asked quietly. Someone like you, who was rejected from Whitmore when you applied 20 years ago. Someone whose own children weren't qualified for admission. The color drained from Ashford's face. The society's background research had been thorough. His obsession with elite private schools stemmed from his own rejection and his children's academic struggles. He had built a conspiracy theory around undeserving scholarship students to avoid confronting his family's limitations. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah continued, her voice calm, but carrying the authority she had learned from Marcus. You're going to delete Amanda's contact information from your phone. You're going to stop your surveillance of her family. And you're going to find a new coffee shop because if I see you within 5 blocks of Whitmore Academy again, you'll be arrested. You can't threaten me, Ashford snarled, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Sarah smiled, and it was the same cold expression she had seen Marcus use on Jerry at the diner. I'm not threatening you, Derek. I'm educating you about consequences. She gestured around the coffee shop, where other customers were beginning to notice their intense conversation. You see, the difference between you and me is that I have institutional support. People who will ensure that your harassment doesn't just stop, it gets punished. She stood to leave, then paused as if remembering something important. Oh, and Derek? Amanda Morrison earned her place at Whitmore through intelligence, hard work, and character. Three qualities you've never possessed. The world is changing, and people like her are going to shape the future, while people like you become footnotes in history. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the same coffee shop, but this time she was there to celebrate. Amanda had not only survived her first semester at Whitmore, but had been elected to the student council. The harassment had stopped completely after Derek Ashford had been arrested for violating a restraining order, not against Amanda, but against another student at a different school. The Society's intelligence network had ensured that law enforcement agencies across the state were alerted to his pattern of behavior. Through the window, Sarah could see Amanda walking confidently toward the academy, her head high and her future bright. It was a future she had earned through her own merit, but which she might never have had the chance to claim without intervention. Sarah touched the Trident ring on her finger, finally, understanding what her grandfather had meant about protection when it was needed most. She wasn't just wearing a symbol of hidden power. She was carrying forward a legacy of ensuring that people like Amanda Morrison could reach their potential without being destroyed by people like Derek Ashford. Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. New case. Corporate executive receiving death threats after promoting workplace diversity. Are you ready? Sarah smiled as she typed a response. Always. She had learned that real power wasn't about commanding respect through fear or intimidation. It was about using your advantages to protect people who didn't have them yet, ensuring that the next generation could build a world where talent and character mattered more than background or prejudice. And sometimes it was about showing bullies that their victims had allies they never imagined, allies who would ensure that justice was more than just an abstract concept. The girl who had once served coffee while being mocked for her cheap ring was gone. In her place stood a guardian, carrying forward her grandfather's mission of protecting the innocent and ensuring that those who preyed on the vulnerable faced consequences they never expected. The transformation was complete, but the real work was just beginning.